Good day, everyone! It's Londononion back with another discussion on archetype builds, and we'll be resuming our discussion on the Gunslinger. Just like our previous videos, builds will be constructed with the orientation of being a solo artist. As usual, I'll be speaking on the efficacy of archetype pairings with the assumption of playing on the Apocalypse difficulty, my general philosophy being that what works on higher difficulties will usually work on lower ones. Given the nature of building archetypes in Remnant 2, there is a good chance we will revisit this pairing, among others, in the future. But let's get started with the Loaded Mercenary. The Loaded Mercenary has the Challenger as the secondary archetype. The Challenger is oriented to toughness, thriving while being outnumbered, and close quarters combat, with an edge for sustaining heavier armor. Their archetype trait, Strong Back, allows them 15 grace units of dodge weight threshold. Taking a quick look at the perks, the Challenger gains enhanced damage and damage reduction with all but Powerlifter, which reduces stamina cost and regeneration delay. Now, there isn't much relation between the Challenger and Gunslinger, but the synergy comes in with how both operate. As I usually would say, the Gunslinger is like the infighter of ranged combat, and the Challenger is the direct fighter compared to all other archetypes. This pairing is consequently predisposed to being the ultimate close-ranged combatant. As we had stated in the overview of our previous discussion, the Gunslinger has no natural defenses and will likely spend more time in combat as they are more of a damage over time specialist, with a focus on weapon efficiency. The Challenger is intended to address both areas of improvement. To tie this pairing together, we'll move on to the loadout. Starting off with our armor, I choose to go with the Bruiser armor set, which will provide decent damage reduction while also maintaining medium encumbrance. As for the weapons, the primary I favor is the Bonesaw LMG, with concussive shot and maximized ingenuity. Concussive shot is inexpensive and is intended to create space for enemies that get too close for comfort, without forcing one to dodge or switch to melee attacks. Ingenuity reduces heat generation by 50%, which equates to firing 99 rounds before overheating. Momentum is also a viable option for increased critical chance. The main difference in performance between the two is that momentum will be better for burst damage, while ingenuity for damage over time, due to the reload buff and sustained fire. The secondary I equip is the double-barreled shotgun with Tremor and Spirit Healer. The maximized effect is only worthwhile for allies, but the main effect mimics Encrypted Ring. With Tremor, this would equate to 15% health regenerated per use. This is intended to serve a similar purpose to Concussive Shot, though this one lasts longer but is mainly effective against grounded foes. Since we have the offensive infighter for a pairing, these contingencies have come in useful against zealous and numerous enemies where conventional offensive methods have proven insufficient. The melee weapon is up to preference, but I favor the Stonebreaker melee weapon with maximized edgelord, which grants increased melee attack speed and 3% of base charged melee damage as lifesteal. The Red Dose Staff with maximized latency is also an option. Moving on to the amulet and rings, I top this loadout off with the Insulation Driver, which grants 15% to all damage dealt, accompanied with haste, provided one has Bulwark activated. For our first ring, I employ the Dried Clay Ring, which grants a stack of Bulwark and a damage buff for 60% of the total Bulwark damage reduction value. Next, Offering Stone increases damage by 1% for 1 second after dealing ranged damage, and stacks 15 times. The duration increases to 10 seconds following enemy elimination. For our third ring, I employ Rerouting Cable, which grants 5% of max health as a shield for 5 seconds after expending 20 stamina units. This lasts 5 seconds and maximizes at 50% shield health. Lastly, I equip Generating Band, for 3% health replenished per second while a shield is active. As an alternative to the last two rings, I would also employ Black Cat Band as a safety net upon sustaining fatal damage, and Encrypted Ring for 20% replenished health over 10 seconds upon mod use. To tie everything together, we'll transition to the skills. Now the skills I choose are static for both sides of this pairing. On the Gunslinger, I choose to employ Bulletstorm, and for the Challenger, I go with Juggernaut. Bulletstorm works well for both crowds and tough enemies. Upon enemy elimination, one's weapon becomes automatically reloaded. This works extremely well with the Bone Saw when equipped with Ingenuity. Additionally, the reload time of the Bone Saw is minimized with this skill. The double-barreled shotgun functions more as a burst damage weapon, but benefits with automatic fire and a seamless reload if engaging in a close-quarter skirmish. Juggernaut adds 3 stacks of Bulwark, increases movement speed, melee speed, and reduced stamina cost by 15%. Stagger is also reduced by 1 unit. So for the span of 25 seconds, one will have a 22% damage reduction with Bulwark, a 28.2% increase in damage with the Amulet and Dried Clay Ring, and a variable 1 to 15% additional damage with the Offering Stone, which can be easily maximized with the Bone Saw. Due to the Challenger perks, enemies within 10 meters will be subject to 35% increased damage. What this build is intended to do is supplement for the lack of health maintenance while enhancing offensive capability on both sides of this pairing, especially since the mercenary is a close-ranged specialist. They become ever more menacing as enemies get close. Chances are, though, one will constantly be on the move while in combat, whether one is sprinting, evading, or swinging their melee weapon. Extra protection will be rewarded with a side of constant regeneration. If employing the Black Cat Band and Encrypted Ring, evasion and regeneration are replaced with offense and regeneration, since one's mods will be their main source. This is a safer alternative and prevents one from being insta-killed, though personally, I favor the former. As far as relics go, I favor the Ripened Heart for its efficiency. The Quilted Heart is also an option, but with Rerouting Cable and Regenerator Band, this already seems mimetic. The shards I employ are Ammo Pickups, Skill Cooldown, and Armor Effectiveness, which will bring armor to 161.5 units if maximized. This is not particularly impressive, but enough to help one survive most initial hits without Bulwark. The traits I employ are Vigor, Endurance, Spirit, Expertise, Barkskin, Handling, Footwork, Recovery, and either Siphoner or Shadeskin. Now, I construct these builds with the philosophy of you can't lose if you don't die. They are ultimately meant to be generally effective enough to have an answer in virtually every circumstance, provided one's skill or lack thereof is not the reason for their demise. However, every archetype and pairing will have their fair share of weaknesses based on their natural abilities and the biomes they explore. Of the 3 main biomes, none were particularly troublesome over others, but rather there are some easily exploitable limitations of this build, particularly with electrical elemental damage when overloaded. And if you're facing off against an aberration that has Shocker, then they could pretty much insta-kill you, unless you're really good at avoiding the shocked areas. Additionally, taking on mixed profiles of enemies, particularly airborne and grounded, is not necessarily an Achilles heel, but an area of challenge. The mercenary is a mid to close range fighter. Having a swarm of both airborne and grounded enemies is quite troublesome. The concussive shot is intended to be a deterrent for this, but with insufficient mod power, combat becomes stressful. Otherwise, that concludes our build for today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.